A little while back, a pretty bold analysis of the crypto industry came out. It called out companies like MicroStrategy as a leveraged time bomb and argued that the entire crypto ecosystem was, well, incredibly fragile. And those predictions, they turned out to be shockingly accurate. So today, we're going to dig into the core of that argument, the idea that the fragility of the entire industry really comes back to one thing: Bitcoin itself.
Now, you have to understand, at the time, this was not a popular take. The general feeling was that the analysis was just totally off base, and that the author, well, you can read the quote for yourself. But this is important context, because what happened next is exactly why this whole thing is so interesting to look back on.
So since those predictions were first made, the crypto market has lost over $1 trillion in value. MicroStrategy's stock took a nosedive. The whole market dropped by more than 30%. Now, this isn't about some "I told you so" moment. It's about recognizing that underneath all the hype, there are some really fundamental systemic problems in the crypto world that are absolutely worth a closer look. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter, Bitcoin. It's not just some other crypto coin, right? It's the foundation, the bedrock of the entire industry. So to really figure out what it's all about, we have to go back to the very beginning and ask a really simple question. What was Bitcoin actually supposed to be? In the original 2008 white paper, the creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, laid out a super clear vision. Bitcoin was meant to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Just think about that. Digital money, a way for us to send payments directly to each other, cutting out the big banks completely. It sounds like a revolutionary idea, right? The big problem is, it just doesn't really work that way in the real world. And to see why, we can just measure it against the classic economic definition of what money even is. For something to actually be considered money, it usually has to do three things. It has to be a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. So, you know what? Let's put Bitcoin to the test. So here's the big question. Does Bitcoin actually work as money? I mean, if we strip away all the hype and just look at how it performs, a totally different picture starts to emerge. Let's break it down and see how Bitcoin stacks up against each of these three functions one by one. Okay, first up, is it a medium of exchange? This is the most basic function of money. Can you actually use it to buy and sell stuff easily and efficiently? Is it something that people and businesses widely accept for payment? Well, the difference in scale here is just mind-blowing. The Bitcoin network can handle about 500,000 transactions a day. And that might sound like a lot until you compare it to Visa, which processes 65,000 transactions per second. To put that in perspective, Visa can handle Bitcoin's entire daily volume in less than 8 seconds. I mean, they're not even playing the same sport. And then you've got the efficiency problem. A single Bitcoin transaction has the same carbon footprint as about 1.5 million Visa transactions. So as a payment system, it's incredibly slow, it's expensive, and it's terrible for the environment. So on that first test, being a medium of exchange, it's a clear failure. All right, so what about the whole digital gold argument? Is Bitcoin a good store of value? Can you park your money in it today and be confident that it will hold its purchasing power for tomorrow? Well, that digital gold idea runs into two huge roadblocks. First, you have the insane volatility. A real store value needs to be stable, right? An asset that can swing 20% in a single month is, well, it's anything but stable. And the second problem is something people don't talk about nearly enough. Who actually owns all the Bitcoin? Despite this whole narrative about decentralization, the reality is that ownership is extremely concentrated. Something like 2% of Bitcoin addresses control 95% of the total supply. And when ownership is that top-heavy, the price can be easily manipulated by a very, very small group of people. That's not exactly the foundation you want for a stable asset. All right, let's move on to the final test. Does Bitcoin work as a unit of account? In other words, do we use it as a standard measurement to price goods and services the way we use dollars or euros or yen? The answer here is a huge, resounding no. I mean, even the companies that say they accept Bitcoin don't actually price their stuff in it. They price everything in dollars, and then they just use Bitcoin as a kind of temporary pass-through for the payment. It's never the actual unit of measurement. So when you test Bitcoin against the fundamental functions of money, it fails on all three counts. Now, a common argument you'll hear is, oh, but it's still early. We just haven't given it a real chance yet. Well, actually, we have. A whole country ran a massive real-world experiment.
Back in 2021, El Salvador became the first nation on Earth to make Bitcoin legal tender. The government launched a national digital wallet, they made businesses accept Bitcoin, and they even gave every single citizen $30 worth of it just to get things started. This was Bitcoin's big moment, its chance to prove it could actually work as a real monetary system. So, what happened?
The results were pretty shocking. Take remittances. People sending money home from other countries. This was supposed to be Bitcoin's killer feature in El Salvador. But according to the IMF, Bitcoin was used for less than 2% of them. Despite this huge government push, 98% of people just stuck with the old system.
And the bad news didn't stop there. Millions of people downloaded the government's wallet app, but a study found that 60% of them only did it to get the free $30 incentive. After they cashed out, they never used the app again. They literally took the free money and bounced. So fast forward to today, and the results of this whole experiment are pretty clear. A staggering 77% of El Salvador's population now believes that no more public money should be spent supporting Bitcoin. The real-world test failed, and it failed spectacularly. So, if Bitcoin doesn't work as a medium of exchange, or a store of value, or a unit of account, then where does its value actually come from? Well, the answer, according to this analysis, lies in a very old idea from the world of finance. It's called the greater fool theory. The theory says that the price of an asset doesn't have to be justified by any real underlying value or cash flow. The price is justified as long as you believe that someone else, a greater fool, will be willing to buy it from you later on for an even higher price.
And here's how the cycle plays out in the real world. First, these really compelling stories get created. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's the future of finance. These stories attract new buyers, which pushes the price up. The rising price then creates a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, which attracts even more buyers. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. But the entire system depends on a constant stream of new people willing to buy in. And that brings us to the pretty uncomfortable conclusion of this whole analysis. Bitcoin's value isn't really based on what it can do. It's based on the collective belief that someone else will pay more for it down the road. It's arguably the largest experiment in the greater fool theory in human history. And the only question left is, what happens when that experiment is over? Because eventually, you always run out of greater fools.